Good afternoon, Stephen. I'm really pleased you could join us here today, and I gather you have just been talking to the CAS Review about the proposed statutory instrument with respect to the Gender Recognition Act. Is that correct?
That's right. We've just been having a very positive discussion with them, in fact.
That's really positive. And what I know is you were instrumental in putting the GRA together back in the dim and distant days of whatever it was, 2003-04, and I believe you got yourself an OBE because of your contribution to that?
I think I got my OBE for being the most reasonable lobbyist in the room.
Okay.
But
yes.
Partly it is that I'd spent years working up to this. I've been campaigning ever since the 70s about why were we effectively, criminalised by the system when in fact we'd done nothing except try and be good people. And so I'd started a very long time before that, so the Act was a culmination of 30 odd years work. So, to me, the thing about, what has just happened, and one of the things that I found most distressing, is that as a lawyer who was so actively involved, to not just be asked the question, is this necessary? Should we be doing this? Is this relevant? Because I could have told them the answers very quickly.
Yes. We'll get on.
A lot of angst.
Yeah, we'll get on to that. Very, very briefly, so what does the GRA do, and specifically what does Section 22 do? Why are these two things important?
Yeah, the Gender Recognition Act is about affording individuals privacy concerning their previous gendered status and certain aspects of their medical history, but it's privacy within a limited framework. There have always been the exceptions. So Section 22 sort of is a clear statement that actually, if you've been given this information in an official capacity that somebody's applied for or has achieved a gender recognition certificate, you must never ever pass that on without their express permission to do so. And it's a criminal offence. It's a strict liability criminal offence. If you do it, you're liable. If you've done that without asking that permission, and it gives a whole wide range of circumstances. Some circumstances are exempt. For example, Section 22 provides an exemption for police providing information to the court when they're investigating a crime. There's also the gender recognition disclosure of information statutory instrument that goes alongside it, which, for example, says that if somebody who's trans is unconscious but needs emergency treatment, a paramedic's not going to be done if they say to, somebody else, by the way, this is somebody who's trans, they've got gender recognition, so all the paperwork's changed, etc., their spouse has just confirmed that. They're not going to get done for that. So, there's always been medical exemptions anyway, and it's also the exemption that we really always objected to was the one about, a minister of the church or a minister of a religious organisation could pass that information on to another minister to avoid them accidentally marrying a trans person to a non-trans person. And, that I always said that's the most ludicrous thing. Why don't they just ask people? And I can always remember the answer, which was, imagine they asked that of a couple and, the guy gets up and thumps the minister then for the insult.
Amazing.
Put a notice up in the church lobby or whatever else. Be upfront about it.
Yeah.
Everyone will know not to go to those churches. But actually, the Act itself, it provides privacy, not secrecy. And it provides privacy in certain circumstances. So, for example, when I was doing work with the Women's Inequalities Committee, I had to go through a security process and I had to disclose that I had gender recognition certificate and my previous status because they needed to ascertain that I have, clear history throughout my life of not being involved in any dodgy organisations. So, it's that. Yeah. It's about privacy.
It's a sensible amount of privacy with balances and checks in the way, yeah? Which is what...
Absolutely.
So
and to be honest, nobody's ever prosecuted because there is such a limit. There's only 6 months in which you can report what's happened and then have somebody in court answering for it, because it's a very limited felony offence. And consequently, by the time the police have messed around, we never get anybody prosecuted. But what it does do, it enables most of us, when somebody's been an arse, to contact the police and get them an official visit to say, don't ever do this again. And often that's enough.
It's often enough. So, why does Cass seem to believe that they need an exemption from the SI?
Because they've been informed by government lawyers that they need it.
What are they doing that they think needs a statutory
They're
judgment?
trying to do something very simple. All of us have medical records. Those digitised records nowadays follow us through life. But for trans people, what we have is a funny little sort of point where we transition. This is 2 years before we get a gender recognition certificate. We transition and we change our name on our medical records, and we are given a new NHS number. That is a peculiarity in the system. It's nothing to do with us. They have to give us a new NHS number to make that change happen. But what we don't ever get with that, when we do that, is any sort of, nobody says, and we will never show your former records to your current medical carer, because actually all of us might need our former records to be shown to our current medical carer if, for example, we turn out to have a genetically related condition, or we turn out to have a chronic condition that maybe has a long history. And in most cases, as we know, if you go to see a clinician and they need to know about some of your past, they just ask you about it. And I always say to the community, if they ask, and what about this and what about this, one of the things you should say to them is, oh, and by the way, I'm currently on hormone therapy, I've undergone gender reassignment and had the following surgery. Because if you don't do that, you're risking somebody making a serious mistake with your body. So health is one of those things where people often get a bit uppity about it, but actually say it's about your health, well-being. Just be upfront.
And
you're not being judged these days. You used to be judged in the past, but we've moved beyond that, thank God.
And as I understand it, the GRC and the change of NHS number, they're not linked at all. The NHS number
No,
change.
they're not related in any way, shape or form. As I said, we normally we get the change of NHS number when we transition. We get a GRC at best, quickest 2 years after that. There's no relationship to them at all.
So I
you
don't
know,
understand why Cass
Cass
think
trying
they
to
need
link
it.
These records, they're doing nothing than what's already done anyhow.
Why do they think they need to? Is this just basically lawyers getting it wrong?
Yeah, they were advised by lawyers from the Department of Health, NHS England, and the Equalities Office. And as I just said, why would any of those lawyers know anything about what the Gender Recognition Act actually does? Other people change their NHS number. People who have been on temporary visas, for example, as asylum seekers, will get a new NHS number. Children who are adopted often get a new NHS number. We don't go around thinking, it's some big security issue. So, I said to them, why did you get dragged down this pathway? And they said, well, because we were advised we had to do the research. And I said, the problem is you have the wrong lawyers in the room.
So you don't reckon they need it at all?
Not for what they're doing, which is to link anonymised sets of data. There's no names. There's no details about anybody's gender recognition status in there. It is simply health records and health only, that they're linking children's records, those which you get since 2009 at the Tavistock when they started digitising them, and those digitised records have never been linked into the overall digital framework. And it's that lack of linking that they thought they needed to have something done about. But if they talk to the information commissioner's officer, for example, and they'd explained what they were doing as they had done to us, they'd have been said, you're not doing anything other than what the health service already does.
So do you detect some darker politics here, may I ask?
It's hard for me to say. I didn't detect any darker politics in the room with the people from Cass, including Hilary Cass herself. I didn't detect any darker politics then. I detected naivety and a lack of understanding about what the Gender Recognition Act is and what the change of NHS number is. But it does concern me that this has come on top of so much of a shit. Particularly think about, say, trans women in sport, because, if they can, my concern is if they can push through an SI with barely any parliamentary oversight that can allow one body to apparently do this, how easy is it going to be to link on top of that or to do something additional to that? Because the SI is not clear enough. The aims that they say, this SI is about the following, but when you read what it's about, it's nonsense, because it says, for example, we need to do this in order to show how many people have been successful in their transition and obtained a gender recognition certificate. But as I pointed out, many of the people who, when they're younger, get a GRC, get it because they're actually quite insecure in themselves. The people who have successfully transitioned in a confident manner often just don't bother getting it until they need it, like they're getting married or adopting kids or something.
Absolutely.
So you're going to appear to be looking for a set of information that actually I think the information you get would tell you something completely different from what that explanatory note says you're going to get from it. And they went, oh, right, yes, that's a point, yes. And it was like, oh, you could see the sort of sparking light bulbs go on.
Okay.
So let's, those of us who have worked and done research with the community for years, have learned these nuances and how to ask people and how to be input and how to give people confidence in what we're doing. And believe that we're doing things for the right reason. I think the problem with CAS is it's within a framework where people were trying to do things for the wrong reason, which was initially to close down the services. And I know from reading the interim report and looking at what the CAS review has been doing, that's not their intention at all. Their intention, hopefully, will be to get to a point where they give us a real good pathway through expanding services. And so, from my perspective, it's what we wanted to do in that meeting was say to them, look, we think there are ways forward here, and it's not a statutory instrument. We think you should probably make a clear statement that you're not behind that, you don't want it, you don't need it. What you're trying to do is something much simpler. You don't want information about people's gender recognition status at all, and you'll never be looking for it. And we get that SI kicked into the long grass.
And you think that's probably where they will come to?
I'm sure it's where they'll come to.
Thank you very much, Stephen. I hope this reassures a lot of people, and I hope that we get somewhere positive.
The key thing is for people not to panic. Don't go off doing things, in a hot-headed manner at this moment in time. We're talking about reaching answers maybe in the next 2, 3, 4 weeks. We're also looking at a government that is collapsing very quickly. By the time we get to actually addressing this government might well be gone. And it'll never reappear. It's never raised its ugly head. Anyway, the SI will fall with the government if the government falls.
I would agree.
Increasingly like the case.
Okay, you just completely ruined my outro from the show. So I'm going to say, Stephen, on that final note, don't panic. It could well not be anything like as bad as we think. Thank you very much, Stephen.
No problem.